Kia ora, nau mai, haere mai. Welcome to the last ordinary meeting of council for the year. Apologies, I don't think we have any this morning. So it's the declarations of interest. Aware of any public forums, petitions, and deputations this morning? So we move to item 5, which is the confirmation of minutes of the ordinary meeting of council of the 6th of November. Somebody perhaps like to move those minutes and see if there's any additions or changes.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Are there any items that need correction? I haven't noticed any. I'm sure Mike will notice them if there, if there is. If not, I will put the motion. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move to item 6, which is the adoption of committee resolutions. The first one is the Civil Defence Emergency Management Resolution of the 18th. Neville, would you like to comment on the meeting?
No, I'll move the team and just note that it was a robust meeting, you might say. Number of issues were raised and dealt with.
We'll get that meeting, so I'm happy to second it. Any questions or comments? If not, I will put the resolution. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
6.1 is Regional Services Committee, 13th of November. Peter, would you like to comment on the?
Yeah, I'll just make a comment, and I'd like to move it also. That it was a really quick meeting. I think it was half an hour because we were on a compressed time frame. There's still 4 outstanding questions from councillors there, but we'll address those as time goes on. We've asked for a standing item to be included within the regional services to address those councillor questions, just like in the strategy and policy have one now. So that's ongoing, and that's about it really. So I've moved it, so I'll just ask someone to second it, please.
By Jeremy, a question from Lyndall?
Yeah, just I'm listed as present, but also an apology. And
You're multitasking.
perhaps my Facebook clone was there and I was not, but I was definitely not.
That's brilliant, that's brilliant.
That's why it took half an hour.
The minor
I'm
alteration.
so awesome, there are 2 of me.
So that will be corrected when they go.
Yeah.
All good. To move that we had a mover and had a seconder, so I'll put it all in favour and say aye. Aye. 6.2 is Finance and Performance Committee meeting of the 27th of November. Morris, would you like to comment?
Move that, Mr. Chairman.
Moved by Morris, seconded by Jeremy. Any discussion or questions? I'm not seeing any. I will put the resolution. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Right, item 7 is notification of extraordinary items of urgent business. I'm not aware of any this morning. Questions? Haven't been made aware of any questions.
Yes, there are questions.
Oh, we do have a question. Oh, we
included on the
do.
agenda.
Yeah.
All right, we will go to the question. Yes. Paul,
Sorry.
do the question.
It's your question.
Oh, yes, sorry.
35.
That's right. It's regarding it's that time of the year when we're turning over our paddocks and noticing quite a few paddocks with a lot of baleage wrapped everywhere through the paddocks. I've noted more on the way through the Beautiful Hotel, a few paddocks there. As part of the regional services, I think it's is it pollution control and environmental education. I think we should go out to the wider community and ask why is this happening.
Peter, you have a comment?
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Look, I'm happy to do as you've suggested in your report. Regional Service Committee Chair present to Federated Farmers on the council's behalf. It's up to the council, of course. So I'm happy to do that if necessary.
Lyndall.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. The only question is that the best avenue? Or are there more avenues as well? I'm happy for that to happen, but is that the most effective way to get the message out? That's my question.
Like, I think it's probably working with the agencies. We know we have a very good line on winter grazing, and it's that licensed to operate site. That sort of thing is not a good look, and I think just a quiet reminder to people, you might get small little pieces, but when there's that amount, it's people not taking the time to actually pick it up and cart it away before they cultivate. Morris, you also have
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Well, I'll just read this out, 'cause it's pretty short. Will the council consider making a submission of a treaty principles bill opposing it being passed into legislation? I imagine the issues are likely well known to all of you, and it's obvious to me that as a treaty partner, we have a responsibility to oppose this bill. I note from a recent survey, Mr. Chairman, that the majority of New Zealand citizens are also opposed to this bill. Only the ACT Party supporters are the only ones that are really in favour of it. Everybody else is fairly strongly opposed to it. So I think there'd be a lot of public support, and given our responsibilities as a treaty partner, I recommend that we ask staff to prepare a report for the next council meeting, which recommends that this council makes a submission opposing this bill. I'm not sure if it's within our rights to do that. I do know we make submissions to other legislation, so I assume that that would be legitimate for us to do that, Mr. Chairman.
I see Robert also wants to speak.
Well, just to the question.
Yep.
I'm entirely supportive of what Morris has said, particularly in terms of our relationship with Mana Whenua, rather than whatever relationship we might have with David Seymour and the ACT Party. It's an entirely inappropriate bill, and it is appropriate that we do make a statement about this because of the huge public interest that there is in the issue. And you will have seen that from the extraordinary turnout of Mana Whenua on Parliament grounds and other activities all around the north. So I'm strongly in favour of the council taking a stand, making a statement. But my question is, when do submissions close? Morris has asked for staff to put a paper together, but I think those submissions close relatively soon.
Probably got a slightly contrary view to that of putting energy into something that's not going to pass anyway. What I think we probably could do is reiterate that we have Ngaitahu is have a settlement that we are actively working with. We've got a local government act which actually instructs us to work with iwi. I think probably personally at a local level, I'd prefer just to say, look, it's business as usual. This is a lot of noise and a lot of efforts going into something that. But we'll ask Rachel.
Thank you, Chair. So the bill submissions on the bill close on the 7th of January, and you'll see your strategy and policy committee agenda a little bit on that. But we have also allowed some time during tomorrow's workshops for discussion on this, and who've been following we've been involved with some work that Uru Kahika, the regional sector, has been doing on a regional sector submission around the impacts from an operational perspective. So we'll share some of that with you tomorrow.
Lyndall.
Yeah, just thanks, Chairman, to follow Rachel. There's as an action from the strategy and policy meeting last time, we discussed having a workshop to hear from our partners about what they feel and what we need to know and how they would like us to act, and that's in some of the follow-up action. So we'll traverse it tomorrow briefly in the S&P, but we haven't got to that point yet.
It's tomorrow as well.
So,
Okay, we'll move to.
Mr. Chairman, can I just get a couple of clarification on that? Does that mean that it is still possible for us to make a submission, or not really?
well, Chairman, for my intention for that discussion from S&P perspective was to get our treaty partners' perspective on what they felt was the best course of action for us. To get their advice on it. Really.
So we'll deal with it tomorrow, that's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Okay.
Peter.
Yeah, just a quick comment. It may not be possible. Is that your question, Morris? that we can make a submission on that, but we may be able to make a statement or something akin to that on behalf to do with their partnership. But I don't know whether it's in the scope of this council to make a submission or not. That's what I would like to find out too, Morris.
It sounds like we can handle it in strategy and policy. It's probably a little bit going to try and do it in questions. Eric, I know you're happy with.
I will make a comment now. I just was going to comment on the closing of submission. We're 6 weeks from the 19th of November, close the 7th of January. But I think the most valuable thing we could do in relation to this, there'll be 20,000 submissions. It'll be buried. But if we put out a statement on the constructive relationship we have with mana whenua here, would be a more positive way of getting that message across.
Try to concur with that.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move to reports, Chairman of Council reports. Yeah, just on that, one of those last issues, one of the meetings I attended in recent times was the regional sector meeting in Wellington, and there is a real appetite to enhance shared services. And the one that was Rachel just mentioned, actually having that directorate actually put together submissions on response to government, something we can actually add some regional flavour to, I think is quite helpful. It's one of those discussions where if we move to more shared services, councils have to give up something, but I think there's a real appetite to actually save money, to have cohesion across the region. I mean, it's everything to having perhaps experienced river managers and what's sitting in Wellington that can help out in other areas. We've got a chief scientist now, we've got a chief analyst that is actually pairing some of the stuff, which actually gives us, I guess, a bit more a unified approach across the country, but still the opportunity to put the regional flavour in. And, you know, comments earlier about if people are concerned about rates, I think what we're trying to do at that level, and it's a very collegial group that are working together, I think we can make some savings and we get more consistency. Wednesday and Thursday, I attended 3 meetings with the PM. We're speaking. The Waimema was the first one where we heard from the Prime Minister, also Todd McClay, who made the announcement on the NES for plantation forestry, which was something we were looking for. We need some direction. We know the trees in the right place are great, but we're getting to a situation where highly productive land going into trees, once it's in trees, it's not going back. So that certainly was quite an innovation to actually hear that. And it's nothing against any sector, but when you've got no rules, you do get perverse outcomes. So that was good to hear. And you want to comment at this stage on?
No, I'll just
it's
if I
indicated.
could, not on this subject.
all good.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, could I ask a question of you?
Yeah.
Did you get to speak personally with the Prime Minister or with Todd McClay?
I did have a conversation with Todd McClay, particularly to do with the way forward with farm plans. And I said, look, I don't want an answer now. So it was really basically getting put in the door to say, look, we're keen to work with you. We've got 18 months to put and have farm plans out. And, you know, we might like to be able to proceed in a draft way after you've come out with your initial regulations. But we'll take that one step at a time. But it's about building relationships, as we did with the last government, and saying, look, this is the direction you're going in. Alistair.
I think the other important thing there, Todd McClay noted that our consent should be of a 30-year duration, so that business have an opportunity to not survive in 10-year slots, but in 30-year slots.
Well, yeah, we'll see where that lands. I mean, the direction of government is very much about increasing exports to reduce deficit, and they're very focused on that, which is understandable. We've probably got a slightly different view on the consents from the environmental side. Give business surety, but we know over a 30-year period things change, and I think everybody agrees we want a sustainable economy.
We also want a sustainable environment.
Yep, well,
Oh, thanks very much. I see there was a mural forum on the 6th of December. Was there any discussion there? Because I take it you don't get together all the time around council amalgamation. And I noticed we've got a item in this agenda about the long-term accommodation project. Was there any discussion about Southland District Council and their recent purchase of their new building in Kelvin Street and how that relates to this accommodation project? Because I thought it was a collaborative project with all the councils in Southland. So I don't know.
I had to leave that meeting early. Jeremy might have been there, so there was a little bit of early conversation. I guess when it comes to local government reform, the one thing we all agree is probably that the current status is not going to survive the next 30 years. But I think a lot of us in this room actually want to do the blank page, to look at the options, and actually in the new year that certainly will be a topic. But Jeremy, you were there.
Yeah, I'll probably talk about that. Privately, we certainly indicated that we all need to be on the same page. And certainly even through their report, they talk, the community will decide this. I just indicated to them that we need to get the community on board, and that's all council. So, and the accommodation thing, it's obviously been in their long-term plan to do the build, but I certainly indicated that maybe that's not necessarily where the build would be from a larger view on life in regards to looking how a unitary authority in the future may be, including over the border involving Clutha. So he certainly knows me personally as a ratepayer and a councillor. What I thought was up,
So live discussion ongoing.
Absolutely, and it was positive back. They said yes, we all need to be on this. So it was just need to get in the room together.
And that's also in Wellington. There will be some discussion in the new year. The government are giving a very strong message about working with regions. But they, as I would like to, would be to have a regional district. Instead of having 3 district plans, it would make sense to have 1 regional plan. There's a whole lot of things where you would get efficiencies and consistency. But on regional deals, etc., they're making it very clear, don't come to us unless you've given up the region. So those are discussions for next year. Any other reports? Linda?
Yeah, can I just comment on that, Chairman? Important to remember a couple of things. SDC have been operating off 3 sites for quite some time, which is less than ideal for them, so I can understand why they want to be all in one place. And secondly, our long-term accommodation group is our internal one, and we're all 3 councils are facing the same issues over where they are now is not viable in the long term, but the new solution is not going to happen tomorrow. So all of us, all 3 or 4, maybe not Gore, still need to find somewhere to live in the meantime while we work out the shared services at the whatever. So that's my understanding of.
Yeah, I think you're right, Linda. But the thing about, are we talking about it at the front end?
Yeah, I think that's a slightly different conversation to the actual accommodation conversation.
Any further reports?
Well, Mr. Chairman, there's a couple of written ones here. Peter's got one and I've got a couple. The one about the local government meeting, Zone 6 is a bit old now. That was very interesting. I think the only thing I could say about that, and it's related to your last discussion about everybody working together, is that that for the Water Done Well arrangements, there's plenty of help available from the government. The DIA is keen for people to work together, but the same old story that some councils are a bit reluctant to get on board, mainly because of their parochialism. Although I do note recently that Gore and Central Otago, I think, have gone together to work something out, which sounds quite positive. Then Nick Smith talked about electoral reform, which we've talked about as well. The other thing there, Mr Chairman, is the CERN field trip that Councillor McDonald and myself were on. We went to the Lower Mataura, looked at a bit of bush that the council, on council land, O'Neill's Bush, promising work going on there with trees, native trees that have been planted and are sticking up above the grass. It's a big effort to get them to grow in an open space, but they seem to be doing quite well there. And I know it takes a long time for these things to come to fruition, but there is good work going on by the council in the Lower Mataura already, associated with these existing patches of bush by enlarging them and increasing the biodiversity there. But I did note that a couple of the people who were on the bus who were farmers were, one said, oh, it's all this raised pasture there, looks lovely, and even though it's a leased land and it's flood prone, and if we are thinking of making some changes to that by building wetlands there or restoring some of it into native forest, there is still going to be quite a good public relations effort needed to persuade people that that's a good idea, because a lot of people will think it's not a good idea. Yeah, so just thank you to the staff who did a lot of organising of that, organised the bus, had a good commentary at various aspects, and it was worthwhile. And Councillor McDonald spoke about our reserves and plans, and he might like to comment on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Morris. Do you want to add anything further to that, Peter?
Not to that. It's all pretty self-explanatory, always well written. But I just the last one there, the Kowhai Reach opening. Notice there's a nice wee picture there, a colour picture for everybody. Wonderful day. And I just want to reiterate there, Francis Shan talked about those two old farmers staring down those diggers when they arrived on the property to straighten all that up. And a lot of people don't realise that a lot of this work went on straightening these creeks, and it was a bit that was untouched. So wonderful day anyway, just a couple of hours down there. Thank you.
There's no further reports.
Just a short report. During the month, I had a meeting with our local MP, Catchment Liaison Chair, Department of Conservation representatives, Fish and Game, with regards to vegetation growth in our river channels and trying to deal with it in some way, shape or form. There was discussion around the lack of money to deal with the issue, the reduced capacity because of the growth and vegetation within our river channels, and obviously liability issues. Also around our ability to manage it better, because currently it's not being managed well enough. So it was a good discussion, and it was good to have everyone around the table, especially all those concerned stakeholders. And it'll be good to have some more discussion at a later date.
Thanks for that, Paul. And we know that vegetation brought up in all our rivers is an issue, and it stops the gravel moving through the system. So, I know it's come up just about all the catchment meetings.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yep.
Councillor, was that were you there as a council representative? Was it a?
Yes, it was called for by the Catchment Liaison Chair and arranged, and I was there as representative of council.
So did somebody take minutes?
It wasn't, I mean, it was a very informal meeting.
Right.
To get everyone together to discuss the issue. We'd like some formality in the future. And it was good to have those groups and stakeholders around the table. Coming to an agreement around an issue. Not coming up with a plan as of yet, but an agreement about the issue.
Chairman, if I could, I'm concerned that you were there as a council representative on your own. And maybe there's a risk there for you being, not you specifically, a single councillor being there on their own. So just raising that as a potential issue. You might get.
Don't think it's an issue at all.
We have to be vigilant.
It was a meeting I was invited to, and I thought it had been cancelled, but I found out that it hadn't been. Otherwise, I think they had a clash as well. So I also have been invited. So Having double job.
Need to keep each other safe.
Okay, we'll move to item 10. First up is 10.1, Chief Executive Report. Would you like to comment on the very comprehensive report?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just so the final report for this calendar year, Council is just wrapping up on a number of matters. Things are not slowing down despite the fact that the holidays are ahead of us. The government's RMA reform program, it continues. In fact, we're expecting that the Resource Management Act number 2 bill will be in the House today. There are matters in there of interest to us. Changes to section 70 of the RMA as they relate to our Rule 24. In our Water and Land Plan amendments are in that, draft amendments are in the regulations. There's also other changes to regulation that will be before Parliament before Christmas, including the water services legislation. Just a few other matters. We've been certainly had quite a number of major events in the region in the last few weeks. Murihiku Regeneration hosted a very large event for 2 days around the whole issue of energy generation in the region and sustainable impacts on climate change and regenerative practices in relation to energy generation. They had invited a number of ministers who had attended, and also a number of diplomats that represented the EU, Germany, Japan, the United States, to talk about their desire to work collaboratively with New Zealand entities, including iwi, around the potential for energy to be a real regional economic driver. So that was very interesting to be in attendance of that. Also an opportunity to meet a number of people from a networking perspective that were there, both amongst iwi and with people that are leaders in the region. So Councillor Ludlow was there for the first day and parts of the first day, and so was the chairman and myself, although it did for day 2 clash with council commitments, so we were only there for day 1. There certainly is a real interest about energy generation in this region, and there is commentary later in the document about the Contact Energy fast track application for their consent, which we've got staff here if you want to ask any further questions about that. There also was a launch since our last meeting of a good piece of collaboration, since we've been talking about collaboration in the region amongst the regional council and its other council colleagues through our CCO Great South, and they have launched DISH, a Data and Insights Southland Hub that brings together a lot of very good data from a lot of it's ours, but also here from the other councils and from other entities in the region as a place for regional development to actually go and understand demographics, impact, land use, etc. It's excellent, and I commend it to council to go and look at, and anybody that you ask questions about in terms of data. In addition to our own most excellent environmental portal, this does actually bring together other people's data along with that. So that was a very excellent event. And also, of course, as has already been mentioned, the Prime Minister was here with Minister Macleay and the Minister for the Environment, who is, of course, also our local MP, at 2 meetings last week, and was most impressed with the Prime Minister spent 2 days in our region. It is quite clear that this, following the visit from Minister Jones, and again, a rather large lineup of other government ministers, that there is real interest in this region and in development in this region, and addressing the infrastructure issues and regional deals were matters that were discussed at those meetings, in addition to legislative change in relation to freshwater management. So there's a number of other matters in here, councillors, which I'm sure that you'll be very pleased to ask questions about. There's commentary around catchment integration, catchment plans, and also commentary around the catchment operations and its flood control work that is underway across the region, including the work that we're co-funded by government for in Te Anau and around Lumsden. There's commentary on some biodiversity and biosecurity operational matters, including pest animals and pest management plan, which you may want to be asking about. And there's also other issues in here in relation to the fast track consents that are before us. So happy to take questions. The staff are here. I see well represented to be able to answer most questions across the portfolios.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much for your report, Wilma. Just a question on the Great South and the data collection. That information that's collected by Great South as an agency, that's all publicly available
Yes,
once completed to everybody here, like upon request?
this is a public-facing website where you can go online and see our live information. That's also available through their portal, in the same place with all the live information that's coming from other agencies at the same time. So it's there to assist anyone in this region who is looking at information for development, information for actually growing the region, to be able to see all that information in one place. I mean, people can still come to our environmental information portal, but that's also collected through this dish site, so we can see it all together. It's an excellent collaboration, and we're well represented on the site, and quite clearly so in the open status. Yeah, so I commend people to go to that dish site and have a look at it.
Okay, thank you.
Morris.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bottom of page 44, the last sentence says, requests for tenders have gone out for regional climate change projection updates. How is that different, or is it different from what NIWA have already provided?
Right. Thank you. Oh, good. Rachel's here. I was looking for Karen earlier because I was wanting her to come and speak to that, but I think she's in another meeting.
So through you, Chair, you'll recall in 2018 we had a piece of work done, which was the regional climate change assessment for this region. Since that time, the national assessment has been updated, and so there is now a need to update the regional assessment. So that's the request for tender that we've put out, is to update the previous work that's been done in light of the new national work and just provide that specificity for our region. And I'm very happy to get the team to talk more about that tomorrow if you'd like.
Right, okay. So that's sort of more detailed than what NIWA has provided. Yeah.
That's right. It drills down level 2 for us.
Thank you. Couple of other questions, Mr. Chairman. On page 45, talking about communications and clarity has been provided to farmers about farm plans. It might just be me. I've had a look at the website, tried to follow through, and sort of helps people about farm plans. But at the moment, I find it quite difficult to follow and not very helpful, to be honest. And I just wondered, when are we going to get a portal that farmers, I'm thinking particularly about sheep and beef farmers who might not have a lot of resources and might not have very a great ability to do this. When are we going to be able to help those people go to the website, click on their comes up with information about the physiographics and their risks areas, and suggests things that they can do to mitigate their adverse effects in a sort of a simple package that people can do easily? Is that something that we are going to have soon or in the future, or is it too complicated at this stage because of what the government is doing?
I know that's front and centre for Sam. Do you want to comment, Sam? I know it's something that you have on your list with some urgency.
I didn't hear the question. I had to answer it again.
So the website update will be priority in the new year from the things in the work plan, so we'll get that sorted straight away.
Okay, thank you. That'll be good to see that. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In the first quarter, Councillor.
Further questions for Wilma? Just on the dish thing, I know that had feedback that the Prime Minister was very impressed with the cordon, which is basically assisting businesses to get up and running, accessing venture capital, and was quite impressed with that. And that's something that we've had really spoken in the early days, so it was good to get feedback that sort of thing that helps people get going is really good. Yes, annual report we'll talk about later.
So, student councils, have you any questions around the consent matters, the contact energy application to the EPA? That's relating to, just pointed to some of the highlights on the ICM partnerships. The Southern Pest Eradication Society is looking to expand its work, so we're working through that with them. Any other matters that you may be interested in from this report?
There's certainly a bit of public feedback about the number of about contacts plans, but obviously it's the EPA that are actually handling this, and we'll have, well, we did talk about wetlands and a few other things.
No other comments?
Well, I move we receive the report, Chairman. It's a very complete report, doesn't actually leave a lot of questions.
Oh, well, it's an excellent lineup of work that's presented every 6 weeks, I
It's
think.
very good.
It's, thank you, and thank you to the staff who compiled this and turn it around on a six-week basis. Thank you.
Report's been moved, second by
Second that, Mr. Chairman, and support councillor Cook's comment.
Thank you, Maurice. All in favour, say aye. Aye. Right, we'll move to 10.2, which is the compliance monitoring report. This is something we've been doing for a very long time, and probably one of the few regional councils that actually do this every year.
A lot of stuff there.
Would you like to comment on the report for a start?
Good morning. Through you, Chair, I will take the report and paper as read. Before I go any further, I would like to introduce Tania McCann, Team Leader for Monitoring and Enforcement, and Karen Thayer, who is the Team Leader for the Technical Team, and they're going to be with me to present the report and answer any questions you have, and joining us is our new General Manager, Hayley. So this is the Compliance Monitoring and Enforcement Report for the 2023-24 year. And I'm really pleased to report that although in that financial year we had a number of vacancies within the team, we actually achieved a thoroughly high workload, which is in comparison with previous years, which is a really positive thing to see from the team. This report also offers the opportunity for us annually to look at areas of compliance where levels have changed and where trends are starting to pop up in changing compliance areas. And this is part of the data that I bring to you annually to workshop when we look at annual priorities. So I'll hand over to Tania, who's going to go ahead with a couple of highlights for her area, then to Karen before we open for questions.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I guess probably key is dairy, always a high topic of conversation. What we are seeing is a trend now continuing down to in terms of significant non-compliance. You'll see on the graph, you can barely see it there. So that's what we want to see. That's absolutely what we want to see. I mean, it's good efforts by the farmers to be doing the right thing. What you will see is that we've had a small increase in the low risk non-compliance. So for those that aren't aware what that is, it's largely paperwork. So we are working with farmers more and talking with them more about it might feel like a tick box for people, but actually it's really important when we have an incident or a concern to be able to make sure that we have updated person in charge forms, that the collected agricultural effluent management plans are a living document that they're aware of, that they've looked at, shared with their staff, and not just a piece of paper that they filled in 5 years ago. So I guess that's probably where we are. With the people getting what we call a 2, which is our low risk non-compliance for paperwork, it does escalate. So someone could actually end up with a 10 for that if it continues to be non-compliant. So a not significant non-compliant doesn't necessarily mean that something terrible has happened on farm. It can be an escalation of just failing to complete stuff. Incidents were slightly down on the last year. There's no real trend there yet. It is a bit all over the place. What we did see was a marked decrease in public notifications of intensive winter grazing complaints. So a variety of reasons we think for that. obviously the high profile this year was the sort of focus on MPI rather than us. So that will have reflected in some of it. The other one where we're seeing some good gains is in gravel extraction inspections. So as you're aware, we've only taken them over in just over a year ago now. So people are getting familiar with seeing us now. Over half of those inspected are now fully compliant. Well, as at the date of this report, we're fully compliant. It's increasing all the time. And that's just about getting our gravel extraction people really familiar with their consent and what their obligations are under that. The significant non-compliance that you'll see in there largely relates to stockpiling within floodways, which isn't a quick fix, but we're getting a really good response from all of those consent holders to work with us and get that resolved as quickly as possible. Key for me, I'll hand over to Kieran.
Yep, we've continued our focus on water abstraction and water use, continuing to do some inspections on fish screens for surface water takes, and we've done a small number of extra inspections of irrigation consents. We've been trying to sort of increase our feedback to consent holders in this regard. Some of the criticism a couple of years ago was that they didn't hear much from us, so we've increased our feedback and response to people's abstraction data, and hoping part of that is trying to get better data so that our scientists and our planners and consent officers can rely on that to do the work that we do in council. We've also continued our scheduled monitoring of industry and local authorities, and we've had some compliance issues on which are detailed in the report. With some of those consent orders.
We're open for questions.
Eric. Yeah, what a comprehensive report, and I have to confess I've read most of it but not all of it. But to me, the interesting bit is comparative to other years, are the complaints and the kind of environmental hiccups, are they increasing or decreasing overall? That's the bit I'm really quite interested in. Are we better across the sectors in terms of compliance? What's happening?
As a whole, it's like kind of a hard question to ask. You mean?
Yeah, no, well, that's what I'm asking.
But as a whole,
are we getting better or worse? Just
from I guess anecdotal, there's more awareness. There's definitely more awareness. People know when something goes wrong, it's not a good thing anymore.
Yeah.
And we are seeing, people are making much better plans to avoid something go wrong, particularly in that dairy sector. And in, industry are probably a bit slower in some areas to the party and faster in others. Just depending on what the fixes that they need to complete. Some have some things that are almost out of their control that they need to try and manage better.
One thing I would add to that is while the numbers for incidents from the public are down this year, what we're seeing is the gravity of the incidents that are coming through to us are much higher than they used to be.
okay.
I think it's a good thing of been doing these for years. If you went back to those graphs 5 years ago, you can have aberrations, but if you go back 5 years ago and look at this, I think we've made some real progress in most areas. Neville.
Yeah, well, a matter of awareness too. The gravel management and the stockpiling of gravel within the flood bank area, I'm just wondering how the operators would think that was an okay thing to do. But, where was the awareness there of the damage that could result?
I'm not sure there was a great awareness. That's what we're working on now to help them understand why that's the problem and get it resolved as quickly as possible. A large portion of them have already removed stockpiles.
Morris and Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, a few things, and some of them might seem a bit pedantic. I apologise in advance for that. The first one is about Invercargill City Council and its stormwater discharge spills. No, this is at the top of page 54. Note the word there should be sewage, not sewerage. I'm sure you're aware of that. Look through the spell checkers. It is quite a concern, and the other concern is with Alliance Group at Mataura. Not really, being as good as they can be. And Mataura Freezing Works has had a long history of problems affecting the Mataura River, and it's worrying to me to see that in this day and age it's not really, not really up playing the ball. I did notice in the newspaper there was a new disinfectant plant put in recently, so hopefully that might improve things. But can you comment on that? And are you worried about those big organisations, one a big industry and the other the city, not really being on top of the things they ought to be on?
Yeah, well, we've spent a lot of time on both of these committed holders, and the Alliance Matilda has taken quite a while to resolve. We've issued a couple of infringements and a formal warning, and yeah, I think there's actually a couple of outstanding issues which we're still working on as well. In regard to the stormwater systems of the TLAs and Invercargill City in particular, it's a lot of the events that we've detailed there came as a result, first of all, of the weather events in February and September, and second of all, some, a lot of the inputs are somewhat out of their control. And so what we do is we're looking as much about what their mitigations and response to those things are, whether it be private industry who are, or private individuals who are putting things into the stormwater that they shouldn't. So, yeah, anything to add to that, Don?
I need to say that while they can't control what goes in, they can control what goes out.
Yeah.
We've formed a really good working relationship with Invercargill City Council on that matter to try and see if we can work with them to improve those practices moving forward.
All right, sorry, Mr. Chairman, there's a few other things. On the report itself, which again is very good, as other people have said, it's an excellent report. It's one of the highlights, I think, of our year. It's a really good report, very well written and very illustrated. I note on the first page, though, on the forward, the third paragraph, there's a word missing out of that. I think it should be, our team has been pulling this report annually. It should be this, has been pulling this report together annually, or something like that.
Sorry, Councillor, can I just butt in? I've raised the grammatical issues with the staff involved, and it appears this is not the finalised, properly edited version, unfortunately. So there are some grammatical errors.
Yeah, okay. Right, okay. Yes. I'm a bit concerned about Pioneer Energy as well, not really complying with their requirements. Once again, it's another fairly big organisation and they should be on top of that. But you don't need to respond to that. That's something that I think is a bit disappointing. Just working through these, Mr. Chairman. The landfill too, the Gore, there's something going on along there that's not very good. Gore has been disposing of unauthorised waste to the Tara landfill. Is that what I read there?
Yes. Yep. So we've had there's an outstanding investigation around that. Yep.
It's an ongoing investigation on that matter at the moment.
So you feel that that's been resolved?
We're still working through that with the district council at the moment.
Yeah, it's not very satisfactory, really, is it? I don't know if you noticed this, Chairman, Councillor Ludlow, but the spelling of the word E. coli is not correct in a number of places. You've got a capital C for coli, and it should be a small c. It is correct in a few places, but incorrect in other places. So, did you notice that, Councillor?
Yes.
Oh, you did? Oh, very well. Nearly there, Mr. Chairman. Oh, yes, another thing that is related to a council. This is the disposal of wastewater to the new wastewater disposal site at the Manapuri Te Anau Airport by the District Council. And this is on page 95. It says that the annual wastewater total nitrogen loading to land was exceeded. And that this has been looked into, which is good. Now that's a particular problem because that land is free draining. It's called monowai soils, which are very gravelly and free draining, and the path of that nitrogen is into the Upper Waihao River and Lake Manapuri. So it's very important that they don't overload that land and that it's not taken up. It's supposed to be put on the land and taken up with the grass, just like any other effluent. And if it's overloading, then that's ultimately going to pollute Lake Manapuri, which is obviously completely undesirable. So I hope that that doesn't continue. Can you tell me what they are doing to avoid that in the future?
I don't have that information actually, to be honest.
No, we can find out, we can report back.
All right, thank you, that would be good.
It's interesting, Morris, because they've got greens for right through.
Well, they've got one green and then two yellows. This is bottom of page 95.
Oh, Kipling, oh, I'm looking at Manapuri itself, sorry, yeah. All good, we have Paul.
Thank you. Dare I say, Morris probably covered a wee bit of it. But with regards to the 31 incidences ICC have had with surge overflows, you know, the golden rule is to keep our stormwater and our surge apart. Is there any measurement on what the number is now compared to what the number has been, and is it improving or is it getting worse? Because 31 incidences it's pretty concerning for me that, and there's a proportion of those going into our waterways.
Yeah, I don't have the long-term trend of that sort of stuff. It's something that I hope to be able to report on over the next few years, just because we haven't kept as good of records over the past as we possibly should have. And so that trend, I'm not sure whether that's going up, down, or sideways. I don't know.
Good. Well, it'll be good if the ICC are reporting those incidences to us.
Yes. Yeah.
Then they'll have records.
Yeah.
Is there any chance of getting the records off them to see whether it's improving or getting worse? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, yeah, we need to find out, because I think it's of high concern that that's a lot of incidences. I know Gore's 4 incidences. I didn't see in there how many were discharged to water, but that raises a level of concern with me. And it'll be good to get that information from South District Council ICC if they hold the information. Okay. With regards to the discharge at Kepler, I think Morris, you said Upper Waihao. I think it'd be the Lower Waihao. No. But other than that, it looks good, but it is scary the number of events in ICC are having. You know, the whole idea is to keep them apart.
Yeah, so those 31 incidences, I think 16 were to land and 15 to the stormwater system. Each one of those ones is investigated. We go out, we have a look. Yeah, we do some testing and things like that. So, yeah, I don't have the numbers in terms of the trends, but hopefully with better recording of these sorts of things, we should be able to.
It'd be good to know if the numbers are decreasing or increasing, because it's a lot of work for everyone.
It is.
It's a huge cost to our team to go out there and deal with this.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a problem that's getting worse, then the cost is only going to get worse. Yeah. Thank you.
Neil.
Well, just about Lions facility of Matera, Chairman. Part of their consent conditions, that latest renewal of their consents, which was 3 years ago now, was to put in their ultraviolet treatment, which you'll see in the newspaper that they've done that. That was a really significant project. It wasn't something that was going to happen overnight. So I'm pleased to see that they followed through on the agreement to do that. The other thing is that they have a continuing dialogue with Hokanui Runanga. That was also part of their consent conditions, so that Hokanui are fully informed about what's going on and have an input to what the progress of the improvements that they're making.
Thanks for that, Neville. Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, more of the same, I suppose, but they are concerning things to hear about because they seem to be happening in the background, and hearing about specific incidents is one thing in a report like this, very good. Firstly, hearing about the dairy farming and their improvements is one thing, but this other side of the picture is, to me, concerning, particularly because I can't see the situation. We hear a bit. What would that look like on a graph showing what's happening with those larger agencies and how impactful that is, particularly how long some of these situations have dribbled on, to use on for. We don't really, I can't see it, and I don't know if the other councillors can, but I'd really like to get a picture of the situation. Wouldn't be too hard. Would it be too hard for you to put something together like that? Sort of almost a historical. I don't know how you would graph this, but just in terms of volumes, and also a little bit of a note there about how long it actually does take for other institutions to clean up their, to make the changes that we would like to see, because it just doesn't sound that great, this kind of background thing that's being alluded to or described here. Does that make enough sense to you to think maybe you could do something to show us these things at some stage?
Through you, Chair. So a couple of years ago, when we had a couple of extra resources added to our team, what that enabled us to do was not only streamline what we were already doing, but dive into areas which we'd never really monitored at all or as deeply before. And so that's some of the things we're starting to uncover now, which is why we don't necessarily have a lot of data. So we're just finding it now. We do have the ability to go back in some areas and uncover some of that stuff now and understand what those trends are like, and we can report those back either through council or through regulatory committee in the future.
Diving into some of those areas sounds good. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Thank you. That would be good. I'd appreciate it.
And it'll be interesting because over the years there has been people who have tapped into the stormwater illegally, and I think some camel work has been done over the years. But we've got old systems where the storm and high flows, the stormwater flows into the sewage, and it's not a quick fix, but it would be good to know how we're tracking. Lyndall.
Yeah, thanks. This follows on nicely from Councillor Guyton, actually, with regards to the stormwater issue, and ICC particularly. It'd be a heat map, for want of a better phrase, would be really interesting about, and to see whether they've got specific areas rather than kind of the retrospective, as well as perhaps Councillor Evans' suggestion, but it'd be really interesting to see whether there are any areas within the city boundary that are most problematic, and I'm sure they've got that data. And it dovetails into the urban development conversation and their district plan conversations around how they allow development to happen and what it's feeding into and what the load is. So there's quite a big, kind of much more global conversation for us to have with our colleagues around the 3 waters plus 1 situation. So yeah, some kind of information from them, maybe a presentation from their staff at some point would be helpful so that we are all on the working together page. Thanks.
Jeremy.
Just in regards to, I see there's been, through this period, there's one prosecution, and I take it's the one that pleaded guilty. Is that right? There's a prosecution. I just see there were 24 charges related in relation to one prosecution. It was one that was quite a focus around the eels, was it?
No, through you, Chair, no. So that's inside this financial year, the one that's is the real
so even though it occurred in the last financial year.
So yeah, none were finalised in the last financial year.
Okay, yeah. So I'm going to ask a question around that anyway. There's obviously a guilty plea in regards to the eel. Is that when will there be, obviously, from a public point of view, there's a lot of understanding, trying to work out what actually happened. Is that going to be through the process and in due course that will come back, or is that information there now of what actually was? I mean, because I pleaded guilty and
So there are
Just trying to
elements,
understand the court process.
so there are elements of the case that are public through the court documentation, but what we've got is a comms plan to come out following it with a little bit of some learnings for the community and a wider understanding of what happened, and we'll be seeking to do that at sentencing. Which is when all information could
Okay,
be
so
made
that's
public.
that's what I'm asking. The other thing is, are we, now this is not necessarily compliance, but actually actively looking at recovery of that creek? Just because it was really quite surprising the amount of damage done. And not that it's a good thing coming out of a bad to actually see what can be recovered, how quickly recover it. That's not necessarily compliance, but it's, I'm just asking from a
I
point of view.
think the judge hasn't made the final decision.
Well, no, I'm just saying within
Yeah.
internal business, yeah, monitoring, seeing if it recovers quickly.
So
Certainly an opportunity to look at when things go wrong. how-
We have
how-
been working with our science team who have done an element of monitoring up to this point. I believe we're giving it a bit of a chance to do its natural thing, and then we'll seek to go back and whether it's compliance or the science team or a combination of us both to see what's happening.
Good.
Alistair.
Are the South District Council and things, are they treated the same way as other businesses are? In other words, when they do offend, they get a fine?
Through you, Chair, yes, if there is an offence or a breach, we do treat them the same, investigated the same as any other consent holder, and they do receive infringements or formal warnings the same as someone else, if that's the right tool.
Yeah,
for the outcome.
that's right.
Right, if there's no further questions, would somebody like to
We'll
move?
receive a very complete report.
I'll second that.
Well, Neville, seconded by Paul, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Well, the next item is being withdrawn, the Robert Leaf.
Oh, that's taking a speech away from me.
Could we have your speech anyway? It sounds like it could be quite good.
I was infected.
I'm just wondering, Chair, whether in fact, Lucy might just like to explain why the papers was drawn, just so that councillors understand, because they were in respectful. It's a very brief answer, but I just so that you understand why a paper has been withdrawn is probably worthwhile.
Prior to the meeting starting, it's first.
Chair, Claudia is here to explain exactly the detail of why, but I'm here to help if I'm needed.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Unfortunately, the paper, we had thought we'd left it in draft and we're still waiting on a legal opinion. And it appears that we might not be able to proceed with recommendations that were made, so we're reviewing the paper to adjust that, which is why it got pulled. Does that make sense?
The paper will come back to us.
It may do.
It may do.
Yeah. Do you just want to explain what the relationship is between us and the ministry as to why that may not come back?
No, I don't understand that. Sorry, I'm just filling in for Ali.
So you need
It's
a
a matter
motion
of
on that.
jurisdiction as to whether it's ours or whether it's national, I think.
You need a motion on that, gentlemen, we know.
Rather it was not ours. Okay, so just so that you're aware of that. Do you need to, is there any procedural thing to the school paper? Okay, that's fine, thank you.
You're just
Thank you
reflecting
so much.
back on that outbreak and when the government, when the MPI actually said they ran out of money, we actually used RAPLAN's money to finish the job, which is something I'm quite proud of, and we've had, virtually no encouragement since, so
Oh,
right.
That was my question. I mean, I was one of the people that was under monitoring. It's 8 years ago, and it's my understanding there hasn't been a Velvet Leaf Park found for 7 years. I'm just wondering why it's still an issue. But anyway, that was my question.
Okay, we'll move to 10.4. Code of conduct.
So, kia ora, councillors. You may recall from a workshop that we had with Meeting Governance Solutions earlier in the year in September that we were going to bring code of conduct policy back for you for adoption, or code of conduct, full stop actually, back to you for adoption prior to Christmas. So we workshop the LGNZ code of conduct with you. We're bringing it back for a decision. This is to replace governance policy, which is quite out of date, so timely that we get this matter addressed. As part of adopting the code of conduct, there are some decisions that council are required to make. So we've got the full templated LGNZ version in your agendas as an attachment. But the decision that you need to make, there are two key ones as part of adopting the code of conduct, is firstly, should a code of conduct matter required to be dealt with, that it goes to an independent assessor for either a one-step or a two-step process. And the one-step process, the assessor deals with the matter in its entirety. At a two-step process, the assessor is able to determine the materiality of the matter and refer it back to the chair or other party for resolution. So one of the advantages of that is that it can help manage costs and time, effort and energy for council as well. The second decision that you need to make in adopting the code of conduct is whether the investigator's decision is binding or non-binding. And we've outlined that in the paper, what that means. There's one other amendment that we needed to make to the code of conduct for adoption, and it was a question that you asked us to come back to you on, generally speaking anyway, and that was the manner in which councillors can engage with staff, and we had a brief discussion about that during the workshop, but we've just formalised that in the code of conduct to say that the expectation is that if you would like to engage with staff, that either comes through the chief executive or the general manager. And we'll put a sentence in there just to specify that. So happy to take any questions, but you've got a series of recommendations there before you, and I suggest that we just take each one of those in turn.
Right, but Peter, then Robert, then Morris.
So that's for elected members, I think. So this would cover our catchment liaison committees as they're committees of council and elected members. Is that?
We would be working through a process with them, acknowledging that we've not historically adopted formal processes with them. I think this is part of how we move with them going forwards. But we'd like to socialise that with them.
Well, if they are elected and they are committees of council, I think that would be appropriate.
If they are elected. Are they elected? I think we've got a piece of work to do as we talked previously to work with the committees and as part of council.
So that doesn't pertain to people that sit on committees either that aren't elected. So we have okay, righty, I'm just that elected word is the one we need to determine what that means. Thank you.
We've got a piece of work to do.
It does talk about communities of council, which I think does cover liaison groups.
It would be good to have some uniformity across that, and some understanding right across all the council committees.
Yep, agree.
Robert, when you were talking about code of conduct issues, you described taking those to an independent adjudicator of some kind. And then a second process where that adjudicator might perhaps refer back to the chairman for the final. You seem to favour the latter. Why?
Oh, I'm not necessarily favouring the latter. I'm just pointing out that if you place all matters with So if you go through the one-step process, so all complaints are referred to an independent, you can invest a lot of time, effort and energy in a process where the matter might be quite small and more easily or more simply dealt with internally. It means you're applying the same or a similar process to big issues and small issues. Yeah. So I just wanted to.
So how are those, if I may just ask, so how do you differentiate between a de minimis matter and a major one? Does that the council do that?
No, that's in this outlined in the two-step process. So you still refer everything forwards to the independent, and they would make an assessment of the materiality.
Okay, thank you.
Morris.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is what I prefer, the two-step process. It seems to be provide a little bit more flexibility, which might be appropriate. Involves the chairman, who sometimes has to do these things. I'd prefer that rather than a single-step process, which seems to be a bit cut and dried and maybe a bit too heavy-handed. But I also prefer the binding recommendation from the investigator. The point of it's a non-binding recommendation. So that's what I would prefer, Mr. Chairman.
Morris, I've got Eric, myself, and Neville. Eric.
I would just support Morris's comment and my attempts to be involved in other things. I've been aware of conduct complaints being made that were not valid, and they're made for political reasons or whatever. While it's all sweetness and light now, we're setting up a situation where things could change in the future, and I'm a strong supporter of the two-step process.
Thanks, Eric. And firstly, thanks for this report. Our conduct was well out of date, needed updated. Most of it's very good, but I believe for a number of reasons that the two-step it gives us the flexibility. If it's a minor issue, the difficulty with if you hand it straight over to some consultant somewhere, it can take up to 12 months, and you've got people sitting stressfully, the public taking interest. So it's got to be flexible, it's got to be fair, and even the report coming back. Do we want to give everything away? I mean, in most cases, you're just going to go with the report, but if you get a report that you're not comfortable with, that you've tied your hands, again, I would probably go with having some flexibility there. Most of the time, it's going to be straightforward, but I get very worried when we hand it all over to some expert, always a cost, and the time frames are quite brutal on people, and it's a minor issue. And the other thing that doesn't seem to always come through is this is about code of conduct for councillors. There seems to be cases in the past where a complaint from the public has been acted on, and it's quite clear that's not valid unless the CEO decides for some reason that there's something they need to follow up on. But never, you've been waiting patiently.
Well, it's already been said, Chairman. I would echo Eric and yours and Morris's commentary that the two-step process to me is the most viable one. And noting again, as you've said, that some of these investigations into code of conduct complaints amongst other councils can take years and cost tens of thousands of dollars without having an acceptable result, which the council takes responsibility for. And I think I would add that the two-step process means that we take responsibility for the decisions which are made at the end of it, which I think is the way it ought to be. We can't just hand it over and say, "I've nothing to do with us anymore," the adjudicators can deal with it.
Morris, Lyndall, then Alistair.
It was Alistair's first, actually.
Okay. Is it the council code of conduct, or is it the council law code of conduct? I would think it would be the council. I agree with the two-step process and non-binding.
Thank you.
Lyndall. Thanks. Couple of things. Because the current one is seriously out of date, I'm keen to get this new one underway. But I have to say I do question the timing because we've got well, potentially a new council coming in, but as noted on page 121, reviewing and amending is not completely impossible. So I'd rather get this one up and running and underway. Also keen on a two-step process, and note that any of that work has to happen within budget once that is determined. So we need councillors to keep that in mind. It's not going to get into a great big expensive exercise, one would hope, if it's necessary at all. And I would think that the recommendations from the independent will be binding. Otherwise, we just end up going round and round in circles again. And that's why we're paying an independent person to make a call, I would have thought. That's me. Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you, Chair, through you. With regards to receiving this, it's called Councillor Code of Conduct. Council Code of Conduct would be something totally different, I would suppose, but it probably might be an idea to look at both at the same time. I agree with the two-step process. I agree with it being binding. But then, you know, the recommendation here is you've got number 3, which is calling it. So recommendation 1 is receive the Council Code of Conduct. Recommendation 2 is adopt a new standalone. Now it's a new title, Environment Southland Council Elected Members Code of Conduct. So we need to go back to what Peter said. We need to be sure about what we're doing here. We need to make sure that we dot every I and cross every T, that we don't encompass other people within this that we weren't intending, or miss out people in this that we should intend to. So I'd just like to say that it's very good, but I'd just like it to be a wee bit more rock solid, if you know what I mean. Robust. Sorry,
the paper does say that it includes people appointed to committees, so it's the language of elected members may not be accurate, and because the LGNZ draft that you're relying on, and also your commentary in here says that the code applies not only to the elected members but also to appointed members of councils and committees. So that's the intent.
Amy will fix it.
I'll fix it.
When you look at page 123, one of them, that they're all common sense guidance, really, that whether it's a member of the committee that gives them good guidance as to, and ourselves to how we should act.
We can, as we adopt it, sorry, through you, Chair, as we adopt it, we can make sure, you know, we don't have to adopt it without making it environment Southland-ified, so we can reflect that, make sure that we're really explicit about that if you don't feel that it's explicit enough as it is.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep.
I'm just a little bit troubled by the inclusion of chairmen of committees such as the catchment liaison committees, because we would be they would be in trouble all the time. The things they say, for example, Chairman of the Mataura Committee saying stuff about Fish and Game is completely untrue. So what happens in that situation?
Natural justice. You can apply the rules of natural justice.
Yeah, but who
would make those claims?
Who would take a?
Well, we've already done it here.
Fish and Game wouldn't do that. It would have to be somebody from this organisation to make the complaint, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I think having that guidance for our chairs is quite useful, rather than saying, no, they're outsiders and they can do what they like. So,
I'm happy for them to be included.
Peter?
I think Morris raises a really good question around consistency right across the organisation. We've seem to have even more subcommittees being formed, where it be here or anywhere. So we need to see some visibility of that consistency right across the board, is my view. And how you do that, Amy, will be
And that, look, I think we acknowledge that we've got work to do with that group in particular. But your point's well made. We are looking for consistency. You know, that enables us to, you know, perform our function effectively as council within its council and committee structure. And so, yeah, like I said, there's work to do. The first part is actually getting the code of conduct adopted, and then, you know, making sure that our committee structure is working effectively, and that, you know, we've got policies and procedures that support that effective running.
A suggestion about how to take this forward, just so that you can have a resolution.
Yep.
So I don't want to cut across Councillor Cox. I just want to say something.
Two or three here, but
I was just going to move a motion, so that you might finish what you're saying
Well,
first.
I think that, you know, I think it's critical that council and those that are part of its committees, whether they are appointed or not, and so that includes the mana whenua representatives, it includes our independent members of risk insurance and future independent members of the investment committee, are all bound by this code of conduct. They will swear to be part of those committees. The question about the status of the catchment liaison committees, they have not made the same sworn statement that councillors and appointed members to these committees have made, nor which also the independent members make. So I think, can we just be clear that this is what we are adopting, and that we, staff will go and look at the nature of the catchment liaison committees and come back to this council with advice as to whether they are covered by the code of conduct quite specifically. But I don't think that we should it should be a problem that prevents us from adopting this from the council and their committees. So all of those individuals that Councillor McDonald has raised, they have all sworn the same statement to be part of council and those committees. So they are bound by the same code of conduct. I don't know that, I think that's a matter that we need to establish, is whether those catchment liaison committees have that same status. And I think I wouldn't like to hold this up, but I think we can make a fourth point, which is that we will investigate the nature of that relative to the code of conduct and come back with advice.
They would need to know.
Thank you.
That's what.
Yep.
Thank you, Wilma. I do believe there's some really good people involved in those committees that would not want to be included. They're there in a voluntary.
They want to be.
They've been protected.
There to be protection.
things are getting a bit loose. I've got John, Lyndall and Neville.
No, look, I think, thank you, Wilma, I think it's been covered off well, and I think we'll move on that.
Lyndall.
Yeah, same. My reading of that elected members and appointed members was the mana whenua reps and the independent members, not the catchment liaison committee. And the members of the committee are not elected; they are just volunteers, right? So there's a difference there, as John was explaining. No, the office holders are elected, but the committees are just people who are on the email list.
The committee members are moved in the minutes.
Yes, but the nature of that status, I think, the committees as they relate to the council, I understand we have some advice on, but I think this is a status that would need to be clearly established relative to being bound by a code of conduct. Also, it will work both ways, councillors, that given that members are the ones that can take complaints, it would be also those committee members that will be able to take complaints in the other direction. So that's, so I think we just need to be really clear about what it is we're actually dealing with in relation to the catchment liaison committees. But I think it's very clear in relation to the committees to which you're all sworn to a particular course of action.
I think regardless where it lands, those points would actually furnish to the as a carrot rather than a stick, saying, look, these are the principles that the council uses. Whether they're bound by it, we'll find out in the long term. Neville, then I think we're probably about ready to.
I was going to move the recommendations, Chairman, but I'd just like to comment on the catchment board people. They were not elected under our system, and I can't see whether legally or morally they can be held to account to our code of conduct when they haven't been consulted on it and haven't had an input to it. So I don't think we should be prolonging that discussion. We'll get a legal opinion. But I would prepare to move recommendation one, receive a report. Recommendation decision two, binding and, decision one, a two-step process. Decision two, a binding, that would give some discussion, binding recommendation, and adopt the new standalone Environment Southland elected members code of conduct.
I would second that, Chairman.
Do you want to note in the recommendations that we will investigate and come back in relation to the catchment gas obligations? That would be the fourth recommendation.
Discussion back advice as to whether or not the adopted code covers the members of the catchment liaison committees.
Yes.
Chairs and members.
So I was looking at 3, is that separate or is it just fallen off? I almost read it like.
So you need to, so the paper at the back is the draft, but the draft has got options in it, so you need to identify the options first and then adopt the code of conduct.
So on that motion, we're doing two-step process. And binding. Yeah. Any further discussion on those matters? Jeremy?
Just quickly, I'll just say, they're going back to liaison committees, they're an advisory group. They do get elected through their own committees, but at the end of the day, if they fall under our umbrella, or do we say if they're an advisory group, well, they do their own thing, we actually don't have to listen to them as well. Is that what we're, that ultimately, because it's the recommendations from the community, but is it a community run? But they do fall under our umbrella, so there must be, we have to have some.
I wouldn't have confidence that the code of conduct applies to them, so I couldn't recommend to you that you do it.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's
Expectations.
an excellent conversation to be had, councillor, I think.
Peter, were you indicating?
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on that. Thanks very much, Jeremy. Determining their status is the first thing we have to do. And yes, advisory groups, but so are our subcommittees too. The full council, one could say.
Okay, are we ready to vote on those resolutions? Yes. So let's, clear, we're on 1 to 3. I'm not hearing too much dissension.
There's four
Four.
recommendations. We've now included that
Oh,
one.
okay, on the fourth one is
Council,
about
staff advice.
Yeah. Committees. Okay, I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against? No. Carried. Right, we will move to item 10.5.
You can go back and play it again.
So, this paper is in relation to council's representation on the Temple Whakapapa Trust. So, Fringe Executive Rob Phillips has been council's representative on this trust. His contract is due to expire, and so this paper just presents the options for council at this point as to how it wishes to proceed going forward. Laid out the pros and cons for council in the paper, and I will take that as read.
Got a bit Lyndall, then Alistair, then Morris.
Thanks, Chairman. Firstly, I don't have a problem with Mr. Phillips continuing because his experience is invaluable in that space. But there's also the continuity conversation to be had, and I wondered if it's possible for us to put in an observer in some way, shape or form to accompany Mr. Phillips, so that a councillor is getting upskilled in the event that Mr. Phillips is unable to continue or when his next term expires. I appreciate that there's an election coming up and that person might be, not there. But I don't think it's a waste of knowledge. Knowledge is never a waste. So that would be something I'm suggesting, if it's possible.
Alistair.
Are we getting any feedback at any stage from Mr. Phillips?
He presents here.
He brings the quarterly report back here through Regional Services.
That's fine.
Morris.
Oh, yes, the third option I think is an interesting one about appointing a senior staff member. And while I understand that some of the senior staff members might have a bit of experience, if you go down a little, but not too far, you've got people like Dave Burgess and Ali Mead who are very knowledgeable in the space. And I would maybe take on board what Linda was saying, retaining Rob, but having somebody like Dave or Ali there as well would be pretty useful.
Just comment, councillor, the staff do attend these meetings and support, and yeah.
So, but not as a trustee.
Trustee, yeah. Can I make a comment on this, Chair? One of the things about trusts, and we've discussed this in relation to other trusts, is continuity is a really good thing in a trust. And that the difficulty with elected representation is that quite often you don't get continuity. So trusts are set up for sort of usually for longevity, and so others on trusts tend to have longevity. And so one of the things in thinking about, first of all, whether council enters into trust, this is another matter that we'll be discussing in a minute, is that quite often in democratic situations, that longevity doesn't get to happen. So this is a trust, we don't have a choice, we don't have control over that. So I would say that longevity is a good thing, and also experience. So, you know, that is just consideration for you in thinking about what the trust model is relative to this council. Yeah.
Right, I've got Peter, Jeremy, then myself.
Yeah, I just support that. I think it's probably important that we have someone, a senior staff person like Morris suggested, sitting there as an observer and continuity as opposed the councillor is probably not particularly wise in these days, because we may not get that. So
staff are always present.
Yeah, look, I support Rob in regards to that, and he does come in and give us briefings of what's going on, so that's quite good. But through the representation, yeah, there's obviously sometimes some of this community in Rakiura, so they don't have that representation. So I was just thinking, even from the point when I sort of support, not necessarily succession, but actually, can we designate a councillor to go? Oh, I take it we could. Does he need to be invited to the meetings? Or just actually have a councillor, you know, be involved within the budget. I'm just saying, give an opportunity for us or someone to be represented from the council, be listening in, or I don't know if they want us there or not, but it's an opportunity to get involved in the community there too. And some, I don't know, it's just put it out there, because we have talked about someone representing that area. Can we actually involved in some way?
I'm assuming these meetings are held on Stewart Island. I was thinking maybe somebody from the community board that's close to the area might even be better to sort of, you know, during the representation review, they felt they weren't well represented. And I support some continuity there. And just looking at the names on that list, there are some are going to change. So I think in this next time looking through the list, so I think the continuity is important. Yeah, having staff or somebody else along that's all getting the feedback, I think is also fine. Any further comments? Or send up? Yeah.
Well, Chairman, I'm happy to suggest that Mr. Phillips continues as our appointee. In the interest of the discussion we've already had. And
So that's, we'll do that one first, because we've got the two recommendations a bit vague. Well, that is the direction, that's probably two, isn't it? Yep. So you'll probably move them 1 and 2.
Yep.
I thought you were going to explain.
I was just going to say, in relation to Jeremy's point about the representation review and the desire for perhaps more engagement from the Stewart Island community, that there will be a conversation coming back to council in relation to that. So we'll do that in the new year.
The recommendations have been moved and seconded. I'll put the recommendations. All in favour will say aye. Aye. Against no. It's carried.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to 10.6, long-term accommodation. Welcome, Don. Would you like to talk through the report?
Thank you, Chair. Morning, councillors. I'll take the report as read, but what I will touch on now, and we'll go into this in more detail in the to be rescheduled workshop, is essentially two options we're working up as part of the long-term accommodation project. One of them is Environment Southland, if we have to go out on our own. So what does that look like for us? Could we refurbish this building? Could we rebuild here? Could we look at another site? The second option we're looking at is a shared accommodation solution. Now, I can't speak for SDC, but what I can say is that we're in pretty active discussions with ICC in terms of a shared accommodation option. And as recent as last week, I met with management from ICC where we agreed to enter into a joint project management relationship where we're going to specifically manage the shared accommodation piece of work as a joint project between the two entities. And so as part of that, we will also agree on the scope of that work, the timing, and the deliverables so that we ensure both entities are aligned in terms of what we're trying to achieve from a shared accommodation option. Now, as the project name gives away, the long-term accommodation project is first and foremost, we're looking at accommodation solutions for Environment South. So whether it's on our own or with another council or other entities, we're looking at the accommodation needs first. Flying on the back of that, and it will play a much stronger part if we get in that shared accommodation route. Shared services will start to become a bigger part of that conversation. But first and foremost, we've got to ensure that we've addressed our accommodation needs, and then we start looking about what synergies we can create and efficiencies from being in a shared relationship. So that's probably the only points I'd probably like to sort of elaborate on in addition to the paper, other than to say that we've developed a lot of good work as part of this project in terms of understanding how we work and what we need as an organisation to do our work, and that's some of the detail we'll go through in the accommodation workshop.
I've got a couple. We'll go with this for a start. We've got a couple of people on that committee as well. I've got Eric and Peter.
Yeah. Thanks for the update, Don. But have you got any idea of timeframes? Like we're coming up to a change, an election next year, and this could get a bit messy with that. We've got to make some big decisions at a time when there's going to maybe be some departures from the council, and I'm just thinking ahead a bit to having a tidy process.
Yeah, so that part is why we've sort of both councils insisted we need to have a joint project management arrangement across this, because we have been talking for a while and we just need to bring it together to meet that. We're both, conscious of the election next year and the potential putting a big decision up before that time frame, but we don't have a confirmed that at this point.
Peter.
Yeah, thanks very much. My understanding that the district council were to be involved at some stage later on. Is that still understanding that that will be the case, or is it now just between Environment Southland and the Cargill City Council?
Yeah, I can't speak to what their intentions are at the moment, but I can say they have been involved in earlier discussions with ICC and ourselves, and more recently though it's just been ICC and
Well, this is probably a 4 to 5 year project. You've got ICC who've taken up temporary accommodation. But at the end of the day, we want something that's going to work for Southland, that's going to encourage shared services and efficiencies. So look forward to see where it's going to go. But probably Jeremy and Phil might like to make some comments.
Yeah, through Chair, thanks. Just in regards to Councillor McDonald's question, obviously, I think we had a meeting and first I knew about the purchase of Southland District Council was in the paper. So I know I'd asked Tom how we're getting on engaging with other councils. So and the reality is ICC is obviously working sort of very, very well with us, looking at where we can, if we can work together and it makes sense was the discussion around shared services and amalgamation and all these things, looking in the future. But as I say, it's plenty of time. Like, it's not going to happen overnight. But I think the work we're doing in regards to just the planning, what we need, seeing some of how these buildings function, looking ahead and efficiency and getting the best out of a work environment. It's quite exciting to see what work's been done, and hopefully we'll be having workshops in the near future. Obviously ICC are doing the same. We're sort of getting up to being on the same level in regards to that. So obviously other councils are making decisions in their interest too, so we can't do anything about that. So, but we're working well. Oh, we can, but not at the moment.
Morris.
Well, I think it's disappointing that district council seems to have pulled out of this. I think we should make some efforts to try and bring them back into the fold. It would be silly if they, if we don't join them with them. We're talking about shared services in the district. Southern District is one that we do share a lot of stuff with. So is it possible to talk to them maybe at a governance level to try and get them to re-engage? Is that important? Do others think that's important or not?
Mr. Chairman, I could say that that's a really good suggestion, because the project that does headed by long term. So I think we should welcome re-engagement if that was at all possible.
Phil, would you like to make
two comments I would offer. One is that the analysis today has been really reassuring and helpful. I think it helps us better understand even our current arrangements and how we work and what works well and what doesn't. I think on the second question that's just been raised, you can always ask the question, but if another entity doesn't want to engage, then that's their prerogative as well. So, the door or the invite should remain open, but to say, I wouldn't be spinning our wheels and wasting lots of resources on something if they choose not to go there.
Neville.
Well, I'm just echoing what Phil just said. I think it has to be between willing parties. Chairman of one of the parties at the moment is unwilling and says so openly. I would compliment the committee on getting ICC and Southland together to have a discussion on our future. I think that's a major step ahead just by itself.
I think the door's always open here, and I think staff have engaged in the past, but the offer hasn't been sort of taken up in regards to that. I'll say that, and with discussions that are quietly with even the mayor that they're doing their thing, and that's part of their long-term plan. They had this budgeted, so I thought they need to think a wee bit wider in the conversation around building and things, but you can't force them, although the community could force them to. We're certainly doing our part. I want to reiterate that, working with other councils to get the best outcome and most efficiency. So just let's make that point very clear. Yeah, I'll have a second.
Move a second, but Paul, you.
Thank you, Dom. I'd like to echo what Jeremy's saying with regards to amalgamation, shared services with all councils. It's extremely disappointing on my behalf, in my thoughts, that one is not talking or one is not at the table currently. We need to get everyone around the table, and it concerns me. The whole point of an amalgamation is, or shared services, is to reduce costs. And to our ratepayers, it would be awesome to prove that we can reduce costs. But when councils aren't sitting around the same table and some are going out and doing their own thing independently, it's showing no validity to what we're trying to achieve, and our ratepayers are going to shake their heads. I think we need to, the old adage, knock heads together, but I don't know if that'll ever happen. We'll get everyone around the table. Thank you for your efforts, and
Let's move and seconded. look, yeah, thanks for the report, and actually thanks for the people who are involved in actually doing a comprehensive bit of work so we can make a balanced decision at the end of the day. And, you know, this is going to take a bit of time, but the public will make the final decisions. They are looking for efficiencies, and if they don't get them, they may make their own decisions when it comes to the election. So I'll put the motion. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move to 10.7, which is the council and meeting calendar.
And, this is just an indication of the approach that's being taken to the meeting calendar for next year. Take the report as read, happy to answer any questions.
I think it's good we've got it out there now, put in our diary, doing stuff around that. So I don't know. I'm happy to move.
Second.
Moving second, there's no anybody wanting to apply for leave or anything?
Yes.
No, that's the next one.
Next one. Okay, I'll go move second that one. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Next item is the council's meeting schedule for December 2024. There's not much left of it, but there's points and comments. And this is the one where if you've got any leave of absence requests, they can be taken.
Go.
6 months off.
Yes, can I please apply from the 27th of January to the 1st of June?
Sorry?
27th of January to the 31st. And then also please from the 10th of March to the 23rd of April. 24th year.
Let's ask a question of the council. Can you say you're going to be away on the 27th?
Yeah.
Good to know. So you won't be back until the 31st. Because we're going to schedule, that was going to be the week. Normally that's the first week we have council meetings, so we've moved that a week in order to have our strategy meeting. So are you okay with that, councillors? Just checking.
I think we've got 12 councillors and 2 absent means it shouldn't hold up work. And that discussion recently.
I just wanted to be just clear that you know that you're clear that will happen when you're away. That's all.
Yeah.
Paul.
I'll speak. Thank you. 29th of January to the 4th of February, please. Including the 29th, which is a strategy session.
Any further advances? If not, would somebody like to move the
I'll move that we accept those
moved by Neville,
applications for leave.
seconded by Jeremy. All in favour say aye. Right, we'll move to Eric's favourite.
I'll
the
move.
Common seal. Seconded by Morris. All in favour say aye.
Not finished yet, got a public testimony.
Complete the public part of the meeting. For last year, and for the reasons was to go into.
Going into public excluded as set out on pages 196 and 197 of the agenda. Confirmation of minutes, adoption of committee resolutions, and to deal with an item relating to the Southland Heritage Building and Preservation Trust.
Happy to move.
Moved by Jeremy, seconded by Phil. All in favour will say aye.
Aye.
And I have an indication when we are